My mother-in-law called me a village girl in front of 300 guests. She stood beneath the golden lights of the ballroom, wearing a lace gown that probably cost more than my mother had earned during her final 5 years as a teacher. With one hand wrapped around the microphone and the other resting proudly on her son's shoulder, she looked directly at me and smiled. Not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who believed she had finally defeated me. "My son deserves a wife who understands the responsibilities of standing beside a successful man," she announced. "Not someone who still behaves as though she has just arrived in Lagos from a village bus park." Laughter spread through the room. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others lowered their eyes, pretending they had not heard her. But many laughed openly because they believed she was powerful enough to humiliate anyone she pleased. My husband, Chinedu, stood beside her. He did not defend me. Instead, he adjusted his expensive suit and glanced towards the beautiful woman sitting at his table. Her name was Anita Balogun, the daughter of a wealthy businessman, and the woman my mother-in-law had already chosen to replace me. I had known about their relationship for 3 months. What none of them knew was that I had also discovered their plan to remove me from the company I had built, transfer its most valuable assets, and leave me with nothing but a disgraced marriage. My mother-in-law raised her glass. "To the future of Nwosu Continental Logistics," she declared, "and to the woman who will help my son take our family company to the next level." Anita stood up slowly, smiling as though she had already been crowned. That was when I rose from my seat. The laughter faded. I picked up the folder that had been resting beside my handbag and walked towards the stage. My mother-in-law frowned. "Amara, this is not the time for another one of your emotional scenes." I climbed the steps and held out my hand for the microphone. She refused to give it to me. Then the company secretary entered the ballroom with 2 lawyers and 6 members of the board. My husband's face changed immediately. I looked at him and smiled. "You are right, Mummy," I said. "This is not the time for an emotional scene. It is time for a change in management." But to understand why my husband suddenly looked as though the floor had disappeared beneath his feet, I have to take you back 8 years. I did not come from wealth. I was born in a small town outside Enugu. My father repaired generators, motorcycles, and anything else people brought to his workshop. My mother taught mathematics at a government secondary school. We did not have much, but my parents never allowed poverty to become an excuse for dishonesty or laziness. My mother used to say, "Amara, people will look at your clothes and decide what they think you deserve. Let them. Your work will eventually introduce you properly." I carried those words with me when I received a scholarship to study accounting at the University of Lagos. Lagos was overwhelming at first. Everything moved too quickly. People spoke loudly, dressed confidently, and behaved as though everyone else was competing with them. I lived in a crowded hostel, worked weekends, and sometimes survived on bread and groundnuts so I could save transport money. After graduation, I joined a technology company that developed software for transportation and warehouse businesses. I was hired as a junior accountant, but I became fascinated by the problems our customers faced. Goods disappeared between warehouses. Drivers manipulated delivery records. Companies lost millions because they could not track fuel, vehicles, or payments properly. I began developing a financial tracking system with my friend Zainab, who worked in software engineering. For 2 years, we worked on it at night while keeping our regular jobs. Eventually, a major distribution company tested our system and offered us a contract. That one contract changed everything. Within 4 years, our platform was being used by more than 50 businesses across West Africa. A larger technology group later acquired most of the company for an amount I had never imagined earning. I did not announce the sale on social media. I did not buy a mansion or begin dressing in designer labels. I paid my parents' debts, bought them a comfortable home, and created an investment company called AO Capital. AO stood for Amara Okeke. That was around the time I met Chinedu Nwosu. Chinedu owned a small delivery company with 12 vehicles, 8 of which were barely functioning. He was charismatic, ambitious, and constantly talking about how he would build the largest African-owned logistics company in the region. I met him when he requested a demonstration of our tracking system. He arrived 40 minutes late, but he apologized so sincerely that I laughed. "I promise I am not usually this disorganized," he said. I glanced at the unpaid invoices scattered across his office desk. "Your paperwork suggests otherwise." Instead of becoming offended, he smiled. "That is why I need you." At the time, I thought he meant my company's software. Later, I realized he meant much more. Chinedu had vision, but his business was collapsing. He owed the bank, 2 of his vehicles had been seized, and his drivers had not been paid for 6 weeks. I should have walked away. Instead, I studied his business and saw potential. He had valuable contracts, loyal employees, and relationships with companies that larger competitors had failed to secure. What he lacked was capital and financial discipline. AO Capital invested 250 million naira into the business. In exchange, my company received 72% ownership. Chinedu remained the chief executive and public face of the business. I became chairperson of the board, although I rarely attended public events. We changed the company's name to Nwosu Continental Logistics because Chinedu's name was already known within the industry. That decision would later become one of my greatest mistakes. Within 3 years, the company expanded into Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. We purchased modern trucks, opened 2 warehouses, and secured national distribution contracts. During those years, Chinedu and I also fell in love. At least I believed we had. He proposed after a company retreat in Accra. We were married the following year. His mother disliked me from the beginning. The first time I met her, she looked at my simple dress and asked what my parents did. "My father repairs machinery, and my mother is a retired teacher," I answered. Her expression changed immediately. "So you are from an ordinary family?" "We are hard-working people," I replied. She laughed. "Everybody says that when there is no money." Chinedu squeezed my hand beneath the table and later apologized for her behavior. "She is old-fashioned," he said. "Do not take her seriously." I should have paid attention to the fact that he apologized privately but never corrected her publicly. At our traditional wedding, his mother complained that my family had not provided enough gifts, even though her own list had been excessive. She criticized my mother's jewelry. She mocked my father's accent. She told her friends that Chinedu had married me because he felt sorry for me. I remained quiet because I did not want conflict at the beginning of my marriage. My mother advised me to be patient. "You know who you are," she said. "You do not have to answer every insult." What I did not understand was that some people interpret patience as permission. After our marriage, my mother-in-law began telling people that her son had rescued me from poverty. She spoke as though every dress I wore and every car I entered had been purchased through Chinedu's generosity. She had no idea that the home Chinedu and I lived in had been purchased through AO Capital. She did not know that the company paid Chinedu a salary because I had insisted that ownership and management remain separate. She did not know that her own monthly allowance came from a family support account funded by company dividends paid to me. Chinedu knew all of this, but he allowed his mother to believe that everything belonged to him. At first, I assumed it was pride. Later, I realized it was preparation. As the company grew, Chinedu changed. He began introducing himself as the founder and owner of Nwosu Continental Logistics. During interviews, he spoke about building the business from nothing and rarely mentioned AO Capital. When journalists asked about me, he described me as his wife who occasionally advised the finance department. The first time I confronted him, he laughed. "Amara, the public needs a simple story. They do not want complicated details about shareholders and investment structures. The truth is not complicated. You own the shares, but I built the brand. We built it together." He kissed my forehead and told me I was being sensitive. I wanted peace in my marriage, so I let the matter go. Then his mother moved into one of the company's properties in Ikoyi. The house had originally been purchased as accommodation for international executives. Chinedu asked if she could stay there temporarily while her own home was renovated. Temporary became 4 years. She replaced the furniture, hired staff, and began telling people the house was a gift from her son. Whenever I visited, she treated me like an unwanted guest. One afternoon, she invited several women from her social club for lunch. When I entered the dining room, she waved towards the kitchen. "Amara, tell the cook we need more drinks." One of the women looked surprised. "Is this not Chinedu's wife?" My mother-in-law smiled. "Yes, but she is very comfortable helping around the house. She grew up doing these things." The women laughed. I walked into the kitchen, not because she had ordered me, but because I needed a moment to control my anger. When I told Chinedu what had happened, he sighed. "Why do you keep allowing her to provoke you? Your mother humiliated me in front of her friends. And you want me to do what? Fight an elderly woman? I want you to tell her to respect your wife." He looked at his phone. "I have a meeting, Amara. We will discuss this later." We never did. Our marriage became increasingly lonely. Chinedu traveled constantly. He changed the password on his phone and began returning home after midnight. He told me the company's expansion required his full attention. I wanted to believe him. Then I met Anita Balogun. She attended a company dinner wearing a silver dress and sat beside my husband, even though the place card had assigned her to another table. Chinedu introduced her as a consultant whose father's investment firm was considering a partnership with us. Anita smiled at me. "I have heard so much about you." "That is interesting," I replied. "Chinedu has never mentioned you." For 1 second, her confidence disappeared. My mother-in-law quickly intervened. "Anita is exactly the kind of woman our company needs. Educated, polished, and connected." I looked at Chinedu. He said nothing. 3 weeks later, our company secretary, Mr. Adesanya, contacted me privately. He had worked with me since AO Capital first invested in the business. He was careful, loyal, and not easily alarmed. "There are documents you need to see," he said. We met in a quiet conference room at our lawyer's office. He placed several papers in front of me. Chinedu had been negotiating with Balogun's strategic partners, Anita's father's company. The proposed agreement would create millions of new shares and sell them to the Balogun family at a heavily discounted price. The transaction would reduce AO Capital's controlling interest. There was more. Chinedu had promised to transfer 3 warehouses and the company's most profitable delivery contracts into a new subsidiary controlled by him and Anita. "He cannot approve this without the board," I said. "He intends to present documents carrying your signature." I looked closely at one of the papers. The signature was similar to mine, but it was not mine. My husband was preparing to use forged documents to take control of the company. The betrayal was so calculated that I could not speak for several moments. I had invested in Chinedu when no bank would lend him money. I had protected his reputation, supported his family, and allowed him to become the public face of a company I controlled. Now, he planned to use my trust against me. "Does he know you brought these to me?" I asked. "No." "Do not confront him. Continue as though you have seen nothing." Mr. Adesanya looked concerned. "What are you planning?" "I am going to give my husband enough room to reveal exactly who he has become." Over the next 2 months, I behaved normally. I attended family dinners and listened while my mother-in-law praised Anita. I smiled when Chinedu told me the company needed fresh investment. I even allowed him to explain why I should sign documents that would supposedly simplify our corporate structure. "These are routine," he said, sliding a folder across our dining table. I opened it slowly. Inside were resignation forms, share transfer resolutions, and a document authorizing the movement of company assets. "You want me to resign as chairperson?" "Only temporarily. Investors are sometimes uncomfortable when a husband and wife hold senior positions in the same company." "Which investors?" "Several groups." "Does Anita's father happen to be one of them?" His hand stopped moving. "Why are you mentioning Anita?" "Because she seems very interested in our company." Our company, he repeated. The way he said it told me everything. Yes, Chinedu, our company. He leaned back. You have never understood what it takes to run Wosu Continental. You sit behind the scenes and review numbers while I build relationships, travel, and carry the pressure. I invested the money that kept the company alive. That was 8 years ago. And I still own 72%. His face hardened. This obsession with ownership is damaging our marriage. I closed the folder. I will ask my lawyer to review the documents. There is no need. There is always a need to review legal documents. He snatched the folder from the table. You know what your problem is, Amara? You do not trust me. I stared at him. No, Chinedu. My problem is that I trusted you for too long. He left the house that night. The following morning, my mother-in-law called me. She did not ask what had happened. She already knew the version her son had given her. A wise woman does not compete with her husband, she said. Whatever you have belongs to Chinedu now. That is how marriage works. That may be how your marriage worked. It is not how company law works. She gasped. You see why I have always said you are disrespectful? We accepted you into this family when you had nothing. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked her a question. Mummy, who told you I had nothing? My son changed your life. Did he? You should be grateful he married a village girl like you. I ended the call before anger made me reveal too much. A week later, Chinedu announced that the company would host a grand celebration for its 10th anniversary. It would be held at one of the most expensive hotels in Lagos. Government officials, business leaders, journalists, and international partners would attend. As chairperson and majority shareholder, I should have been involved in planning the event. Instead, my name was missing from the program. Chinedu was listed as founder, chairman, and group chief executive. Anita was listed as the newly appointed director of strategic partnerships, even though the board had never approved her appointment. I contacted Mr. Adesanya. It is time, I told him. We called an emergency board meeting. The independent directors reviewed the forged documents, unauthorized negotiations, and evidence that Chinedu had attempted to transfer company assets. The board agreed to suspend him, but I asked them to delay the announcement until the anniversary celebration. Some directors objected. You do not owe him the opportunity to embarrass you again, one of them said. This is not about embarrassment, I replied. He intends to announce an illegal partnership publicly. We need the investors, journalists, and employees to hear the truth at the same time. On the evening of the celebration, I wore a simple dark green gown made by a young Nigerian designer. When I arrived, one of the event assistants looked confused. Madam, your seat is at table 23. Table 23 was behind a large pillar, far from the stage. My husband sat at the center table with Anita and both their families. That arrangement had been deliberate. I took my assigned seat without complaining. The program began with a video describing Chinedu as a visionary who had transformed one delivery van into an international logistics empire. There was no mention of AO Capital. There was no mention of my investment. There was no mention of the fact that the company had owned 12 struggling vehicles when I became involved. Then Anita took the stage and spoke about the future. Nosu Continental is entering a new era, she said. Through strategic partnership, stronger leadership, and a unified family vision, we will become one of Africa's most influential companies. She kept looking at Chinedu as she spoke. When she finished, my mother-in-law took the microphone. She praised her son and then began speaking about the kind of woman a powerful man needed beside him. That was when she called me a village girl. She told the room that I lacked sophistication, ambition, and understanding. She said the company had outgrown me. Then Chinedu joined her on stage. He took the microphone and looked in my direction. Amara and I have experienced personal differences for some time, he announced. Although we respect the years we have shared, we have decided to move in separate directions. That was a lie. We had made no such decision together, but I understood what he was doing. He wanted to remove me from his life publicly before announcing Anita's family as the company's new investors. He expected me to cry. He expected me to run from the ballroom in humiliation. Instead, I stood and picked up my folder. My mother-in-law looked irritated when I approached the stage. "Amara, this is not the time for another one of your emotional scenes." I held out my hand for the microphone. She pulled it away. Then the ballroom doors opened. Mr. Adesanya entered first. Behind him were the company's lawyers and 6 board members. Several guests began whispering. Chinedu stepped forward. "What is going on?" Mr. Adesanya did not answer him. He walked directly to me and handed me a second microphone. I turned towards the audience. "My name is Amara Okeke Nwosu," I began. "For 8 years, I have served as chairperson and controlling shareholder of Nwosu Continental Logistics." The room became completely silent. My mother-in-law laughed nervously. "Controlling shareholder? What nonsense is this?" I opened the folder. "Nwosu Continental has 100 million issued shares. Through AO Capital, I own 72 million of those shares." Anita turned towards Chinedu. "You said she owned a small minority." He did not respond. I continued. "Mr. Chinedu Nwosu owns 12%. The remaining shares are held by employees and early investors." My mother-in-law grabbed her son's arm. "Tell them this is a lie." Chinedu stared at me. "You had no right to bring private company matters into this celebration. You turned this celebration into an announcement of an unauthorized transaction." Anita's father rose from his table. "What unauthorized transaction?" One of our lawyers stepped forward. "The proposed share issue and asset transfer presented to Balogun Strategic Partners were never approved by the board. Several supporting documents appear to contain forged signatures." The room erupted. Journalists lifted their phones. Guests whispered across tables. Anita's father looked as though he wanted to disappear. He turned angrily towards Chinedu. "You assured me everything had been approved." "It was going to be approved," Chinedu said. "By whom?" I asked. "The chairperson you plan to remove with forged documents?" My mother-in-law pointed at me. "You are trying to destroy your husband because you are jealous of another woman." "No, Mummy. Your son destroyed himself because he believed marriage gave him the right to steal from me." I nodded towards Mr. Adesanya. He read the board resolution aloud. Effective immediately, Chinedu was suspended from all executive duties pending a full investigation. His access to company accounts, properties, and confidential information had been revoked. Anita's appointment was declared invalid. The proposed partnership with her father's company was cancelled. Chinedu stepped closer to me. "You cannot remove me from my own company." I looked into his eyes. "That is the problem, Chinedu. You repeated that lie so many times that you began to believe it." My mother-in-law suddenly looked frightened. "What does this mean for our family?" I knew she was not asking about our marriage. She was thinking about the house, the cars, the staff, and the monthly allowance. "It means the company will no longer pay personal expenses that were never properly authorized." Her mouth fell open. "The Ikoyi house belongs to my son." "The Ikoyi house belongs to Nwosu Continental Logistics." "You cannot throw me into the street." "You will receive formal notice and enough time to arrange alternative accommodation. I will not treat you as cruelly as you treated me." For the first time since I had known her, my mother-in-law had nothing to say. Chinedu lowered his voice. "Amara, let us go somewhere private and discuss this." "You announced the end of our marriage publicly. Why should the consequences be private?" I was under pressure. "From whom?" He looked at Anita. She immediately stepped away from him. "Do not blame me," she said. "You told me the company belonged to you." Within minutes, the united future they had presented to the room began collapsing. Anita left the ballroom with her father. My mother-in-law sat down, shaking her head. Chinedu remained on the stage, but nobody looked at him like a powerful chief executive anymore. They saw a man who had built his reputation on someone else's silence. The investigation lasted 5 months. Forensic accountants discovered that Chinedu had used company funds to pay for gifts, holidays, and an apartment where he met Anita. The board dismissed him permanently. Some of the forged documents were reported to the authorities. On the advice of my lawyers, I will not describe every legal consequence, but I can say that the investigation followed him for a long time. Our divorce was completed the following year. Chinedu tried several times to reconcile. He sent flowers, he wrote letters. He came to my office and waited in reception until security asked him to leave. During one conversation, he cried. "I became lost," he said. "Everyone treated me like I was the company. After a while, I forgot where I ended and the company began." "You did not forget," I replied. "You knew the truth. You simply hoped I would remain too quiet to defend it." His mother eventually sent me a message asking to meet. We sat in a quiet restaurant on a weekday afternoon. She looked smaller without the expensive clothes, drivers, and women constantly surrounding her. "I was wrong about you," she said. "You were. I believed my son had given you everything. You believed that because it allowed you to mistreat me without guilt." Tears filled her eyes. "I am asking you to forgive me." "I forgive you." Hope appeared on her face. "But forgiveness does not mean returning to the relationship we had," I continued. "I no longer need your approval, and you will no longer have access to my life." Her shoulders dropped. I paid for my meal and left. Nuosu Continental Logistics was later renamed Meridian Coast Logistics. I wanted the company to have an identity separate from the family that had nearly destroyed it. We introduced stronger governance policies and appointed an experienced chief executive. Within 2 years, the company became more profitable than it had ever been under Chinedu. I also created a scholarship in my mother's name for young women studying accounting, engineering, and technology. At the launch ceremony, my father stood beside me wearing the same simple wristwatch he had owned for almost 20 years. He looked around the room and smiled. "Your mother always said your work would introduce you properly." I held his hand. She was right. People sometimes ask why I remained silent for so long. The truth is that I confused silence with peace. I believed that if I ignored disrespect, supported my husband, and protected the family's reputation, love would eventually correct everything. But silence does not change people who benefit from your silence. It only gives them more room. My mother-in-law called me a village girl because she thought humble beginnings made me inferior. My husband treated me like an obstacle because he thought love had made me weak. They both discovered the same truth that night beneath the golden lights of that ballroom. I had never been powerless. I had simply been patient. And when my patience finally ended, the company, the house, and the future they had planned without me remained exactly where they had always belonged, in my hands.